In the fall of 1944, in the hills of Los Angeles, a child was born to Rebecca and Sidney Fishman. She would grow up to become Elizabeth Loftus. Loftus was raised in the town of Bel Air, California. Her childhood was marked by tragedy when her mother drowned when Loftus was just 14 years old. After this, Loftus turned her attention to school as a distraction, where she excelled at math and is described as becoming a dedicated worker. Loftus did her undergrad at UCLA, where she studied math and psychology. In 1966, she started her graduate degree at Stanford, where she would meet and marry Jeffrey Loftus. Combining her two interests, Loftus studied mathematical psychology, but the field soon disenchanted her. She didn't feel it was applicable to the real world, so she turned her attention to memory. Her first experiments examined the effects of language cues and wording on retrieval. After finishing her studies, it was important to Loftus that her work always relate to the real world, always have a purpose or explanation for everyday life, which, along with a keen interest in crime, is what led her to work with the justice system.
How accurately do we remember the details of a complex event, like a traffic accident, when it has happened in our presence? More specifically, how do we do when we're asked to estimate some numerical quality, such as how long the accident took place, how fast the cars were traveling, or how much time elapsed between the sound of a horn and the moment of collision? These are questions Loftus and Palmer were interested in investigating in their study, Reconstruction of Automobile Destruction, an example of the interaction between language and memory. For this study, participants were shown a film of a car accident. They were then asked how fast the cars were going in one of two ways, either how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, or how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. It was found that the speed at which participants estimated the cars to be traveling changed significantly, depending on the type of language used to describe the different accidents. The reason for this has to do with the verbal label that the accident is given through the use of the leading question. But the way the question is phrased not only affects the way participants thought about the accident, it actually changed the way that they remembered the video footage altogether. A week later, participants returned to the lab and were asked if glass was present after the accident. In the real footage, there was no glass, but those who were prompted with the high-impact words like smashed were more likely to report that glass was there. This shows that simply changing the way a question is worded can change the way an event is remembered, which is a pretty powerful effect, especially in the case of witness memory in the justice system, which is what Loftus went on to study next.
The last theory made famous by Loftus is the lost in the mall technique. This stated that through suggestions and questioning, the participant would eventually create a false memory of being lost in the mall as a child. They found that around 25% of participants were able to do so. Here's an example of the study.
So, when you were a child, did you have any traumatizing memories, say, if you ever lost your parent in a busy spot or a very crowded area?
Not that I can remember.
Because your parents were telling me about one time, I think they mentioned it was a grocery store where you had wandered off at some point.
I don't think so.
Do you remember being really upset about that? I think you were wandering up and down the aisles. They said, like, when they finally found you, it was hard to keep you to stop crying.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry to tell you, but, well, it's actually a good thing. Your parents informed me you were never actually lost in a grocery store.
What?
By suggesting and asking you questions about this and confirming that your parents had told me this, which they hadn't. You've never been lost, like this memory.
But I remember it though. It's in my mind.
Yes, but it's false, like you made it up because of.
Although she's provided amazing insight on the topic of false memories, not everyone is a fan of her research or believes her findings to be beneficial. Loftus has been insulted by prosecutors, attacked by airplane passengers who recognize her, received hate mail and death threats, and has had to have protection from security guards during speeches. Finally, a conspiracy theorist believes she was engaged in satanic ritual abuse and has assisted in covering up those crimes as part of a larger conspiracy. She has had to go through many a lawsuit as well. We wanted to see how Loftus's research affected our own Mount A community. We were lucky enough to interview Dr. Tomes on this subject. We asked her, how has Loftus's research influenced your teaching and your own research? To which she replied, Loftus has had a huge influence on my research. My undergraduate honors project was an extension of a paper she published years ago, looking at individual differences in susceptibility to misinformation. That was a topic I continued for my master's thesis. For my PhD thesis, I switched paradigms to the DRM, but remained focused on the creation of false memories, and many of Loftus's articles were cited in my thesis. I continue to cite her papers in my current research projects. As I often teach classes related to research area, Loftus's research is a favorite topic in many of my classes as well. In my memory class, I also include other information about Loftus going beyond her research to discuss some of the reactions, in some cases very serious negative reactions, to her research findings. This is a great example of the effects of research going well beyond the laboratory.